to see you both.
Lovely to see you.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely. So much fun with this film. I mean, Claudia, I do have to ask because I'm just curious from a filmmaking mindset early on. Are you making a survival film? Are you thinking you're making a shark film? Or are you thinking you're making both? Because in a lot of ways, it is both. Like, I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of both. Of course, it starts as a disaster movie, I suppose, and the shark is just her added, or the cherry on the cake, if you will. Yeah, it's the combination that makes this interesting, isn't it?
Sophie, does it read like kind of like survival and with like sharks in it? Does it read like, oh, it's a shark movie with like the survival component? Like, how does it read before you film it? Like, I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, one of our producers, Annalise, she said to me, it's a female-led survival film. And I really like that because I think kind of at its heart, the characters, you know, we want to survive. You know, that's what we're trying to do. The sharks are just kind of one of our problems.
100%. And it's interesting because, Claudio, from a director perspective, you have all these characters that have different personalities and clash with each other, and they are on all equal playing field with they have to figure out a way to survive. So it's interesting because you have the script and you talk to like the team and everything and the actors. What's that kind of journey like guiding that? Where like a lot of these characters don't really see eye to eye or don't really have same vision. Like, I'm curious about that. That seems like it's very interesting.
Well, it is, and it's a challenge. With these movies, you always have very limited amount of time on screen to create characters that are believable. And sometimes you go like, oh, it's a bit thin, and I'm not quite sure what it is. But then you hold on to something, like it can be one line here or there. They go like, well, maybe we can expand that into more of a story. So what I was very happy to do on this one, and the actors, the cast around Sophie was so good at it, we would often improvise scenes that are not in the movie, but may have formed their relationships or their past, stuff that they experienced, and kind of just improvise it to experience that and informed their behavior and how they carried themselves opposite each other. And I think that created a tremendous sense of reality of these characters that you not normally have on a page of a script of this kind.
It's interesting too that you say that because, you know, that like Sophie, that kind of, it's two journeys in a lot of ways from a storytelling acting perspective, reading a script and then going and filming it. But did it feel kind of like one big journey with multiple steps, specifically with No Way Up? Because it is one big journey, but there's different steps I find before you film it and like after you film it.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, I guess, because it was all, you know, we did it quite quickly. So from kind of, you know, being cast and reading the script to wrap, it wasn't a huge amount of time. So I kind of felt like we were all just on this roller coaster and kind of all just went through it together as a cast and crew. So yeah, I think it kind of did just become this one big kind of massive journey.
Speaking of journeys, Claudia, was there a journey character-wise in this film that you were really kind of intrigued with in terms of seeing that kind of growth from the beginning of the film to the end of the film specifically?
Well, definitely. I mean, everything centers around Sophie's character, Ava, who becomes somebody who finds resilience inside herself that she didn't know was there. But I will say there's also, I've always been intrigued with Phyllis's character, who's a grandmother who ends up, and this is a spoiler, handing her own grandchild into the hands of somebody that she just met on the plane, thinking she has a better chance with her and sacrifice her. I mean, who does that, and what does it take for somebody to do that? I thought that was a nexus. That was one of those areas that, you know, were really interesting, an interesting scene that formed the characters.
Well, it's this act fast or you're going to die situation, right? Where that's why, Sophie, I find it's interesting. All these characters, when we meet, you know, your character and her friends going on the plane and everything, and there's kind of those kind of discussions with the stewardess and everything, and you know, everybody like has to get their stuff together. Like there's no choice in everything. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
What is that like specifically? Like where like your character like has to adapt, like no choice. Like yes, there's some past. We see glimpses of there's some, you know, trauma in the past and kind of worried about flights with your character, but like there's no time. Like you have to figure it out, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think, you know, in many ways, although, you know, as Claudio said, we had kind of invaluable time at the beginning of the shooting to kind of talk through the characters and the relationships and kind of work on those backstories. But then, as you said, you know, in the story we're telling, all of those characters are in a very much a kind of life or death act now kind of scenario. So, we could have all that backstory and all those kind of things informing our performance, but in many ways it is very much kind of this like face value. We have to do this thing or we will die. So I think it was quite fun in many ways. I think those kinds of scenarios kind of bring out the kind of your true self, because there's not enough time or room for pretense. So you're just really kind of who you are in that moment and doing what you have to do.
Swim or sink, isn't it?
It's pretty.
Yeah.
Well, no, I always, because we don't really think about it much. Like that was my favorite thing about this movie is all these characters are completely different mindset-wise and are on different kind of levels of their life if you think about it, which is really fascinating, Claudio.
And the ones you think, typically in those movies, it's the men who make the decisions. Who, like, if you go back to Airport 77 and Poseidon Adventure, those older times sort of scenarios, it's the men who run the show. And in this one, it's kind of the men kind of like, they're not worth much, in fact. And shit hits the fan, they kind of falter, and suddenly the women step up and be like, well, but we can do this. And they have sort of calm demeanor. And I thought that was kind of original and really cool.
100%. And I wanted to ask both of you this, but so I want to start with you. I mean, we talked about it, like the survival component of it, of course. But yes, it does have sharks. So if you think about it, technically it's a shark movie. And people don't mess around with shark movies. Like, I love every time a shark movie comes out, I watch it and I marathon them all year long. Is it cool to think about it that No Way Up is going to be maybe part of these like shark movie marathons? Like, do you think about that at all? Like, it is exciting from a shark movie fan. Like, it's exciting to kind of add a new one.
What are you talking about? Of course. I mean, phenomenal. That's where we want to be. Like, yes. And then if we hook them as a shark movie and then maybe offer the audience something else in addition, even better.
I mean, the poster does have a shark in it, so I think you want to. Well, no, because it's like a two-headed monster. I love it and everything. Claudio, from like a action point of view, because you worked on the sniper films and as well, what was that like kind of bringing the action component as well? Because it's like a thriller kind of survival and everything, but there's some really good action scenes as well with swimming and kind of getting in there. What was the action component like for you filming this?
Well, I love these technical engineering challenges and thinking of, because if you look at it, most of these action sequences, when you shoot them, you go like, well, but physically, this is kind of completely impossible. And you have to make it appear as though it's possible and give it sort of an emotional grounding and POV that goes like, well, but that's probably what it feels like, and figuring that out is fantastic. And being able to work with a stunt team like we had, visual effects team that we had, was just really gratifying. And I love these challenges, I will say.
And Sophie, I feel like it depends on the project, and maybe the answer to this question is not really, because in the moment you're focused, especially what you said about kind of the time frame and filming it and quickness and everything. But are you ever conscious of an audience member like watching this film, like when you're making it at all? Like, oh, like how are they going to react to this scene, or what's going to happen here when they go underwater? Like, I'm just curious if you ever think about that at all while filming it, or does that kind of happen a little bit after you wrap?
I mean, I think we did really think about it. There's a sequence at the end of without giving too much away, where my character holds her breath for a very long time.
Yes.
And so that was kind of in the back of my head, this sense of like, watching this. I don't know if it's all over TikTok, but people doing hold your breath with me, and then they like go diving and you're supposed to hold your breath while you're watching this TikTok. And I feel like there's a bit of that of the audience kind of, if you were to be, when you're watching it and you're watching her just fighting for her life, that tension just like ramps up. So yeah, and then those sorts of sequences, I definitely thought about it.
100%. And last question for both of you before we wrap up. I mean, Claudio, the whole kind of ensemble cast, but the ensemble cast where everyone's always together, because you know how it is in movies, right? Like we might have a few scenes with this character alone and then two, but like these like, six, like they're all together the whole time, right? What was kind of the, advice and guidance you gave your cast in regards to the fact that like they will all, like, it's like a family on set the whole time they filming it, if you think about it.
I think everybody's a bit nervous about it, but they say casting is directing. Casting is 90% of directing. And I was so fortunate, so lucky to have this ensemble together. And frankly, I believe very much so it's centered around Phyllis, who is such a giving a spirit and a warm person and just wonderfully welcoming to everybody. And that sort of spirit kind of spread out over the entire cast that we had there. And so it felt like they didn't mind being stuck together in this enormously small place for weeks on end. They even spent the weekends together. So they're like, I think we scored. Really, really, really happy about that. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, do you want to talk about that quickly for a wrap up? Being like, it's ensemble cast, but this was like really an ensemble cast.
This was really, yeah. I remember when we first walked into the set and realized just how small it was, because there's the cast, but then there's also the camera and the sound and Claudio and just everyone in this very, very small space. So I think kind of we all got on so well, and I think that really informed kind of our performances and the way we approached the whole thing. And it was an incredible experience.
Totally. And No Way Up's going to be in theaters and everywhere you rent movies on February 16th. Claudio, Sophie, great chatting with both of you. Thanks so much for coming on Pop Turnitive.
Thanks so much, man.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Pop Turnitive. Make sure to check out our past episodes of Pop Turnitive on YouTube.
This has been an Autograph Communications production.